Hi, guys. Wanted to say Merry Christmas. This Thursday will be a Christmas Eve, so we won't have a Q&A. And since this is the last teaching before Christmas, I thought I would stop and pull a few interesting things out of some of the scrolls and some of the other documents about the birth of Christ. And we all know he was born probably in the fall, not on Christmas, but it's the date we set aside to honor him. And we've talked about the dates before, but I want to show you something you may not know about. And I think this is pretty interesting. So first, let's go to Luke chapter 2. And I want to focus in on the angels coming in and something really interesting from the Old Testament about the angels. And just to start reading with this, it's Luke chapter 2, verse 1. This is King James. It came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. Interesting thing about that is you can find Cyrenius and the timing of him being governor two separate times, and that causes a problem with some people's calculation of the genealogy. But he was basically there for a while, removed for some other reason, and then came back. So anyway, so all went to be taxed, everyone to his own city. And we've heard the stories before about when you are taxed like that, it depends on who you are, what family you are. So you have to go back to your family's heritage. So Joseph would have to go to the area of Bethlehem for Benjamin, Judah, that area. And so that's why they had to travel. So Joseph went up from Galilee, where he was living, out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, into the city of David, which was called Bethlehem, because he was the house of the lineage of David. And of course, 69th of the 70th, to be the Messiah's genealogy coming. So he went there to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, not married yet, but espoused is basically like engaged. She was great with child. And so it was, while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. So she started her time. Run down here. And she brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger because there was no room for him in the inn. So they're going to Bethlehem, but there's so many people going to do the taxes also that there is no room for them to even rent anything. So she's in a stable, basically an inn or a manger, and that's where she gives birth to her child, which is Jesus. Now look at this next part. This is kind of interesting. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night. So what's going on here is there's lots of shepherds all over, but near Jerusalem, where the temple is, and they have lots of sacrifices on a weekly basis. They have a large amount of flocks that they keep because a lot of the sacrifices have to be absolutely perfect. So you can't really walk your sheep 100 miles and have it still be perfect. It's going to have some sort of scratches or problems with it. So it was customary for them to take a sheep, sell it, take the money to the temple, buy a sheep that's perfect, and sacrifice it. So they have to have this area of a lot of sheep. Now, at this time, the area between Bethlehem and Jerusalem, there was a large area, and anciently this was called the field and tower of Edar. We'll see that in a minute. But this is where that stuff was going on. Now, he was going specifically to Bethlehem to pay taxes. They stopped somewhere in the vicinity of Bethlehem, which had grown over the centuries, not very much, by the way. So there's shepherds there, of course, because they're keeping the flocks for the temple sacrifices. Okay. Now, this is going on. In verse 9, it says, "And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said to them, Fear not, For I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you this day in the city of David, which is Bethlehem, the Savior, Christ our Lord, is born. This shall be a sign to you. You will find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. Suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, on earth peace and goodwill toward men. Now this is really interesting. So this whole, why was it that there was the slaughter of the innocents of Rachel, which is in Bethlehem, but why was it he appeared first in Bethlehem? Why was he born in Bethlehem? Now the prophet Micah mentions that, but the shepherds coming is really interesting. And the angels, if you'll notice that the angels didn't announce it to anyone else first. The very first people whom it was announced to was those shepherds. Not even the Magi. The Magi kind of knew from the scrolls, were searching for him, but this time it was announced. Now, the answer to that is really interesting. If we go back to Genesis and let me find it here, chapter 35. This is when God blesses Jacob and renames him to Israel. Okay, so that story is going on. And when you get down to verse 21, it says something really interesting. And you've probably read this 100 times, passed by it, and thought, But everything in Scripture is kind of important. So he says here, this was all going on, and it says, Rachel died and was buried in Ephrathah, which is Bethlehem. Jacob set a pillar on her grave, which is the pillar of Rachel's grave until this day. And then from there, he started a journey. He journeyed a little way and spread his tent beyond the Tower of Edar. Now, where is this Tower of Edar? It's right there on the outskirts. At the time of Jesus, it would be actually Bethlehem still, but it's on the outskirts of the town at this particular time. Now, this doesn't tell us anything, and it came to pass, other things happened. But why does the Holy Spirit tell us that he camped out beyond the Tower of Edar? Well, what's really interesting is, and I've mentioned this to you before, is like this is the Hebrew version, so this would be the original scriptures. When Ezra came back from Babylon, everyone spoke Aramaic, which is a sister language, kind of like Spanish and Portuguese. They're different enough that you can understand each other, but it's kind of difficult to understand each other. So similar kind of things, but to have an easy reading scriptures. You know how a lot of people look at the King James and have to read it 2 or 3 times, but if you pick up a nice, smooth, modern English translation, it just flows. So Ezra decided to not tamper with the scriptures, but create what are called Targum. And a Targum is an Aramaic translation of the scriptures. It's not a paraphrase, it's an actual translation. But what happens in time, the people that make the Targums, there are multiple Targums that come out, same information, but they have commentary. And so what would happen is maybe you would have this going on, and then if you wanted to say something about the Tower of Edar, for instance, you just tack it onto that sentence. So the Targums ended up being quite a bit bigger because they're just commentary tacked on. Now, what's interesting is, let me flip this over here. This is the Targum of Genesis 35:21. And let's see what it says. Jacob proceeded and spread his tent beyond the Tower of Edar, exactly the same thing as we have, but it adds this phrase, the place from whence it is to be that the King Messiah will be revealed at the end of days. Now this is interesting because remember they have on their calendar an age is 2,000 years. And at the end of the age of 2,000 years is called the end of days. So we've had 2 of those. We're looking for the 3rd, and there'll be an end of time or destruction of everything at the end of the millennial reign. So, somewhere along the line in the 40th generation, towards the beginning of the age of grace, the Messiah will be born. And this is King Messiah we're talking about. And his revelation or revealing will start in this place. So, the very first place he was revealed or announced, he was born in Bethlehem, but around the Tower of Idar, angels actually came and announced to anyone who was there that the Messiah was born tonight. And you'll find him in Bethlehem in a manger, wrapped in swaddling clothes. So it's interesting for me to look at this. Now, remember, Ezra is about 400 to 500 BC, and you don't know who added what to the Targums or when they added them. But this is definitely BC time, and someone has a revelation that in this area will be the official announcement of the Messiah when he comes. And of course, we see that in Luke chapter 2. That was the official announcement, the very first announcement, the beginning of his kingdom. So I just thought I would share that with you. It's pretty cool. Second thing I wanted to share with you along these same lines is about the Magi. So with that, let me hop over to, and let me see here, rather than just going there, this is a book we did on the pre-flood origins of astrology. And there's a lot of stuff in there, but there's also stuff about the science of the Magi. And the reason this is interesting is because we have astrology, which is, if you want to call it a pagan, demonic, whatever, it's just messed up. But there is the concept of the science of the Magi, and that is that the constellations were formed, basically. The names of the constellations, the name of the individual stars, and we have the Star of Bethlehem, whether that was a supernova in a constellation or a conjunction of planets like what's going on tonight. We don't know, but something like that marks the birth. And what's interesting is they say that the supernova, whatever it was in the constellation of Coma. Now we have Virgo the Virgin, which is a virgin, and Coma is the child of the Virgin. So along the lines of prophecy, if the child of the Virgin is being born tonight, there would be a star marking the birth in that constellation. So something along that line is the science of the Magi. It was taught by, even recently, as far as Isaac Newton in some of his books. So anyway, let's just go to that chapter. And there's a passage in Isaiah 60 about the kings coming that bring frankincense and things like that. So there's a prophecy about the Magi. It doesn't tell us who exactly, just that kings come and give him these things. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, think about the three things that they gave: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, we've all been told gold for king. Kings are rich, and so gold, kings. Frankincense is the main type of incense that they did in the temple. So that means priests. And myrrh, we usually think of it as just the prophecy about his death. But think about this again. He is a Melchizedekian priest, not a Levitical one. So the restoration of all three offices in one person. So they give him gold for king, frankincense for priest, myrrh for prophet, showing that they understood the differences of the prophecies because of the records and things that they had. So let's go on here. Here's Matthew 2, 1 through 8, and we'll just read that. Let me bump this up a little bit, make it easier to see. That's better. Now, Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Behold, there came wise men, and that's a Greek word for the Greek word magi. And people get confused because magi usually means astrologer, and it can also mean court official, much like the word eunuch means somebody that's been castrated. But in certain places, eunuch came to mean a servant in the government, whether they were castrated or not. You know, it starts off with people that protects the king's harem. You've got to make sure they can't do anything with the king's harem. So that kind of thing. So eunuch, magi, things like that may mean astrologer, castrated, etc., or it might just mean government official. In this case, if they understand the science of the Magi, as taught by I think it was Eusebius. They said they were taught by Daniel the prophet, so they understood. We'll see that in a minute. But they came to find the Messiah. So they weren't into what we would consider horoscopes or that kind of astrology. These were actually believers in amongst a bunch of pagans, but they were government officials from a faraway land. So this says they came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he to be born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes together, he demanded of them where the Christ should be born. This has always amazed me. You're the king of the Jews. The main reason for Jews to exist is to usher in Messiah, and you don't even know where he's born or where he's supposed to be born. You don't know anything about the prophecies. You're really that stupid. But yes, Herod was an Idumean, not a Jew, but still he didn't understand anything. So, but this is interesting. So he demands of them when Christ would be born. And they said to them, "In Bethlehem of Judea, because it is written by the prophet," and this is the quote from the prophet Micah. So this tells us also that they all, Pharisee, Essene, Sadducee, all the subgroups, they all understood that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem because of the prophecy written in Micah. And the prophecy in Micah, of course, it says this one is from old, from eternity, or from everlasting, which shows that he has to be God incarnate. So one more of those things. So the Essenes would translate that all directly. Pharisees would say, no, that must mean something else. So they said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, thou Bethlehem in the land of Judah are not least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee will come a governor that shall rule my people Israel." And if that's a quote out of Micah 5:2, and if you read the last part of that, Micah actually says, the ruler that shall rule my people Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. And in Greek, that's called arche, for from eternity, or from the very beginning, the very first. And this is what John in 1 John uses all the time, referring back to this prophecy. He'll say, "We knew him who was from the beginning, he who was from the beginning, he whom we witnessed who was from the beginning." He says that over and over again because he wants you to understand, we know it's him who was from the beginning. He's the baby prophesied to be born in Bethlehem, according to Micah. He's Messiah, he's God incarnate. So it's interesting to see all of these things that most everyone knew, except the people in apostasy that were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. But he stops it short. He just gives you a piece of this because he's pulling a narrative together. He's not trying to give you all the prophecies. What's interesting about Matthew, if you just look at the first even 3 chapters, he will say, I think maybe 6 or 7 times, this happened and this fulfilled this prophecy. But there's another probably 8 things that are prophecies, and he makes sure you know that they were fulfilled. But he doesn't tell you each and every time this was a prophecy, that was a prophecy, this was a prophecy. You have to know the Old Testament to see that. So more than half of the prophecies that Matthew mentions in the book of Matthew, he doesn't tell you directly this was a prophecy that was fulfilled by, that prophet. But almost half of them he does. So he quotes half of the prophecy here, and this is what the prophecy was. So the Messiah is supposed to be born in Bethlehem. Now, if you also understood the prophecies, Balaam in Numbers 24 said there'd be a star that marks his birth. If you understood Daniel 9, from the going forth of the command to rebuild the temple, and the temple was rebuilt, so you could go find that and go forward so many days, Messiah is cut off for our sins. And he has to act as priest, which is the age of 30. So at least 30 years before that, he has to be born, which would be right about now. So these guys, if you understood these things, and he would be born in Bethlehem, Isaiah 11 or 12 mentions his name would be Yeshua. There's a whole bunch of things like that, but just taking the top 5, pretty easy to see what's going on. There's been over 50 prophecies fulfilled since Israel has come back in their land in the last 75 years or so, since 1948. But if you just focus on the top 6 or 7, you get a pretty good indication of where we're at on the prophecy timeline. But let's continue. So then Herod said, when he had privately called the wise men and inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. So he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go, search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also. And of course, he had planned to kill the child. And that's why they go there, they find him, and then the angel tells them to go back another way, do not report back to Herod. And the angel tells Joseph that Herod will seek the young child to kill him, so get up in the middle of the night and flee. And he does, and when he comes back, that fulfills the prophecy in Hosea about my son being called from Egypt. So there's a lot of prophecies in here. But let me go on here. Well, we'll just read this here. So then they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them until it came and stood over where the young child was. This is the reason, the way that language is, that some people think it was a supernova and others don't, because it almost seems like the movement moved. But again, if you believe what Isaac Newton taught about the science of the Magi, there could be something else in there too. But anyway, so they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding joy, great joy. And when they came into the house, notice that's what it says here. It's not the manger anymore, but it's the house. So it's a rented house. So she had the child in the manger, and then later on, they were in a house. So yeah, if you could get out of the manger, that's a good idea. They saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshiped him. So they recognized him as God incarnate. And so then it says, and when they opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, king, frankincense, priest, myrrh, prophet. And being warned of it God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And in the commentary here, we've got the stuff from Balaam. That's the Numbers 24, 16 to 18 is the prophecy about the star. So what's interesting, I want to share you this. That's the one that we know. There is another story to this. And ancient church fathers record a lot of things, and some of it may be fiction, some of it may be a doctored up story, some of it may be perfect history. Either way, these stories exist. And there was a church father, Julius Africanus, who lived around 160-ish, or wrote rather around 160s BC. And he said that he found in the East, in the archives, the Magi's own account of what happened and how they visited the Messiah. And it's interesting because Eusebius also records what happened with the Prince of Edessa and the letter that Jesus wrote to him. So there's several interesting stories about that, and those are all recorded and kept. So in this case, we got what he said. Now let's just look at this a little bit. It's their account, not Matthew's version of what happened, but the Magi's account of what happened with the Star of Bethlehem, Christ's birth. Now this is found in the Ante-Nicene Fathers, Volume 6, under Julius Africanus. So for a second, let me run over here. This is our eSword program. It's free. You can get all these Bible translations all for free. And again, one other thing you can do is other books. And so I think you can see that barely anyway. You can get the, where did everything go? Okay, Ante-Nicene Fathers. So what did I just say? It's Volume 6 under Africanus. And this is all free too, so you can read that account of it. So if we go to Volume 6, All these things. Here's Julius Africanus, Existent Writings, Part 1 and Part 2. So in here would be that story. Okay, so let's just go through this here. Julius Africanus, the church father, wrote that Cyrus had commanded a temple to be built to Juno. Now remember, Cyrus was a pagan, worshipped other gods. He was called by God. He became a believer in the one true God. He made decrees for them to go back, to free them, to go back and rebuild their temple. And all those things happen. But he's raised as a Persian. So in the beginning, he has to conquer everybody first. So he's still pagan. So he commands a temple to be built to Juno. Now, what's interesting to me is that a lot of people think that, well, if this is connected with anything like Juno, it's totally pagan. Well, they worshiped a goddess named Juno. 90% of the time, if you look at the history, she had a father and a mother, and she had kids. And so what it shows us is that somehow there was an ancient queen named Juno that was deified. So if you go back and you look at the person, there's all this other history. And so it's not that the pagans, whatever is pagan, we want to throw away with. We want to shift out the paganism and try to figure it out. So he built a temple to what was being worshipped as a goddess at that time, this lady named Juno, who was probably dead in a tomb somewhere, for centuries. But anyway, in this temple were many idols of various gods and goddesses made of gold, silver, with all sorts of precious stones. This temple also contained a hall of records. Now, remember what's going on is first that the children of Israel were taken captive in Babylon. Daniel was in Babylon. Daniel became, it says, the chief of the magicians. And that's another example. It doesn't mean that he was a magician, but magician meant somebody who could get things done, be it supernatural, demonic, God, whatever. So you're high up in the government, in other words. A warrior that could just get people assassinated would be high up in the government. So he'd be a magician, So Daniel, according to the book of Daniel, is high up there. He was almost given third rulership in the entire kingdom, but said, no, thank you, because y'all gonna be dead tonight. Remember what happened with Belshazzar. And then Cyrus and Darius take the kingdom. Daniel, being a Hebrew, is so upstanding and godly, they continue having him rule. So he rules in the Babylonian area and with Cyrus. So many of these people would have, or the records of Daniel, his people, the prophecies of this great wise magician guy, are all going to be in this hall of records. And so this is what's going on. So Cyrus then made a temple to Juno somewhere along the line. It was a pagan shrine plus a hall of records. So records would be interesting. The Persian historical public records revealed that the king woke one night from a strange dream. He went into the temple of Juno to inquire of the priests there. In his dream, the idols of the temple were all arguing because the statue of the goddess Page was found wearing a diadem with a carbuncle and an emerald on top. Now, this is kind of important because, again, we need to learn dream interpretation. And you're thinking, this is a pagan dude, but so is Nebuchadnezzar. So he has a dream. Let's see if we can interpret it. So Page is supposed to be like the chief goddess. And if we look very close about it, she's a virgin goddess that gives birth. So what's interesting is legends kind of garble. So they're actually kind of sort of worshiping the virgin mother of the Messiah. So we have a type of Mary worship type thing going on, but she's called Page. Okay, so Page was wearing a diadem, a crown, because she's worshipped as a goddess. Okay, we got that. But it has a carbuncle and an emerald on top. I guess a carbuncle here, and the very, very top is an emerald. A star came from heaven and rested on the two stones on top of the diadem for a time, and then went further and seated itself under the diadem. And then a voice from heaven spoke, saying, the mighty sun will come to you and be born of you. So a voice is talking to Page, I guess. and the carbuncle, the stone, and the star, and the voice is saying, the mighty son comes to you and will be born by you. So who is this mighty son? It's he who created this world and below it and all things therein. So that is the creator. And if these gods or goddesses existed or were dead people, or no matter what they are, fake, real, they were part of this world. So this person, the creator, is above everything, being born through Page. Okay. He is the beginning and the end, the beginning of salvation and the end of perdition. And then the statue of the god Dionysus said, our time is over. He who is before all things has come into the realm of men, and we are merely deceivers. Once and all the idols fell down and were no more. Now that would, if you were a pagan king and you worshiped these idols, wouldn't that freak you out? So stop a minute. Your idols are, the dream is telling you that the idols are deceivers. There's one true creator God, and he today is being born as a human for some reason, and he's come into the realm of men. That's enough to really scare you, and I think you'd want to know more of the story, right? So it goes on. It says the Magi were skilled in astronomy, dream interpretation. They stated that the goddess Page was a queen, an ancient queen worshipped in ancient times. It was long since dead and buried. Everybody knew it. These guys are believers, the Magi. So they're like, yeah, we shouldn't be worshiping a dead woman, but yeah, her tomb is over there, so whatever. Anyway, they stated the goddess Page was a queen worshipped in ancient times and was long since dead and buried, but she was the personification of the constellation Virgo, the Virgin. So they had a little bit of astrology in their paganism and everything. Okay, so now we stop at this point and remember the science of the Magi. Virgo, the Virgin, represents the virgin mother of the Messiah. Coma represents the baby that the virgin has while she's still a virgin. That would be the Messiah. So they start worshiping the mother, Mary, as Page. And so they pull these connections together. So the diadem, so they're interpreting this dream. Let's see if we got it figured out or not. The diadem, in the way that it was described, represented the country of the Jews, for they were made of 12 tribes. Apparently, there were 12 pieces to it. We weren't told that in the dream, but we're told that in the interpretation. So the emerald, this is the important part, the emerald and the carbuncle. What do those things mean? And the star that came down. The emerald and the carbuncle were two of the precious stones found in the breastplate of the Jewish high priest's ephod. Apparently, there were two stones that were not in religious ceremonies in their, wherever they're from, out in the East, but they were two stones in the high priest of Jerusalem breastplate, in the ephod. They represented, the two stones, the carbuncle and the emerald, represented the tribes of Levi and Judah. That's interesting. Because when we look at the Targums, not the Targums, the Testaments of the patriarchs, Levi and Judah are almost equally important in connection with the Messiah's coming. So anyway, of course, he's born of the tribe of Judah, but Levi of Judah, Levi's the priestly tribe. Okay, and so in which turn were also known to represent priesthood and kingship. So that makes sense. So priest king, Melchizedekian king coming back. The star coming down from the heavens is none other than the deity himself, the one only creator, the creator of all things. So this is what they explained to the king. And I'm sure the king knows that they were the weirdos that believed in only one God and didn't worship everything. But again, they were mighty men. They got things done. They were loyal to the king, so they're good. Now he has this freaky dream. They interpret it by saying, well, it's obvious, the breastplate, jewels, the true God coming down, prophecies of Daniel that we have in the back room that we don't usually talk about because you get mad, that kind of stuff. But all together, it's pretty obvious. The mother, Virgin Mother, gives birth to the Messiah, and that's what's going on. So then they brought out an old scroll. This to finish off, to make sure the king knows they're not making stuff up. They brought out an old scroll which contained a prophecy about the birth of a king marked by a new star. This would have been the prophecy of Balaam out of Numbers 24, left there by the prophet Daniel. It's what the other church fathers say. And okay, here it is too. Church Father Origen, in his book Against Celsus 160, stated that the Magi had a copy of the prophecy of Balaam, which was found in Numbers 24 about the star coming out of Jacob. It was given to them by the great sage Daniel in the time of Cyrus taking the kingdom. Origen also stated in Against Celsus 158, the historical records indicated the Magi were not Chaldeans, but Persians. Interesting. Iranians. Okay. The Magi remarked that the star had just appeared. So they're off doing their astronomy stuff. And this prophecy, sometime a star is going to mark a king's birth. The star just appeared. And then you have this dream. Obviously, it's all together. So the Messiah is here, right? So the advice the Magi gave the king was to send a delegation to Jerusalem. They didn't have the Micah prophecy, apparently. So why not go to the capital of the nation? Surely somebody there in the royal house would know about the prophecy, not be a doofus like Herod, but somebody would figure it out. So send a delegation to inquire about this new virgin-born Jewish divine king. That's their recommendation. The king did exactly that. He sent a delegation of Magi, again, not necessarily astrologers or eunuchs or whatever, but believers, obviously, because they would know what they're looking for, who had studied the Jewish religion and come to believe in their sacred writings. The rest of what followed, and that's a summary because it's a really long amount. You can read the whole thing in its entirety in Julius Africanus' Existent Writings, Ancient Church Fathers, Volume 6. And again, you can get all that stuff for free. So that's a quick synopsis, but this is cool. Let me read you the actual translation of the important part. When they came to Jerusalem, what happened? So we know Matthew's version. This is the Magi's version. When we came to Jerusalem, the sign of the star, together with our arrival, roused all the people. And they said, "Why are Persian wise men here? And what is this strange stellar phenomenon?" The chief of the Jews interrogated us by asking, "For what purpose have you come here?" Now, this is interesting. Now think about it. Jerusalem is under Roman jurisdiction, so you want to show respect because Rome is very large. Persia is independent. The Parthian Empire had been at war off and on with Rome, and Rome never was able to do anything with the Parthian Empire. So they were independent. So their attitude is going to be, you need to show us respect too. Don't start an international incident. But they're, if you're going to be lippy, they're going to get pretty lippy back. So these are Magi from the Persian court. Very important. So, and I thought it's interesting, though, that the star, with their arrival, everybody was wondering, what in the world's going on? Doesn't anybody in Jerusalem study prophecy anymore? How do you not know? But anyway, Isaiah 60 prophesied that they're supposed to come. The star is in Numbers 24. Micah 5 with Bethlehem. Daniel chapter, just don't you guys study anything? Anyway, so they said, "We're Persian wise men here." And okay, the chief of the Jews interrogated us, saying, "For what purpose have you come here?" And we said, "Because," look at this, this is cool. We said, "Because he whom you call the Messiah has been born." It doesn't take a rocket scientist. if you can read simple Hebrew like us, you could tell me, Ken, can't you read English? You've got enough Bibles. Matthew 5 is pretty specific. It's not hard. He whom the Messiah, you call the Messiah, has been born. They did not believe us, but did not dare to accuse us of anything. But they said, by the justice of heaven, tell us what you know about this matter. So they asked them, what do you know about the Messiah? And that really ticked them off. They're not accustomed to getting questions and getting flack. When they give an order, it best be taken care of. Okay, so here they're in Herod's court. Everybody's like, yeah, I don't know about you. Well, you better figure it out real quick. We answered them. Now, this is a cool answer to them. You do not truly believe in him, nor would you believe us even if we swore an oath. It's pretty obvious. You follow your own heedless counsel because the Christ, the Son of the Most High, is born, and he is a subverter to all your laws and synagogues. That's why you're acting like you've been struck with a dart and are bitter when you hear his name and see that we have suddenly come here because we truly do believe. Can you imagine getting an embassy, someone from another embassy saying, shh, don't start an incident. I asked a simple question. Do something. That's pretty amazing. We usually think of them as rich, because they brought gold, but we usually don't think of high government officials. It's really interesting story. So they took counsel together and urged us to accept gifts and to tell no one that such event had occurred in their land, because it may cause people to revolt against them. Isn't that amazing? If the Messiah is here, who cares? Step down. It's his. What is wrong with you? That's their, but then these guys are like, let's hide stuff. No, we're not doing that. We replied, I love these guys. We replied, we have brought gifts in his honor with the view of proclaiming these mighty things which we have witnessed in our country, witnessed here, we're going to tell about them in our country, on occasion of his birth, okay? And you dare bribe us to conceal these things which the divinity who is above the heavens has communicated to us and neglect the commandments of our proper king? Okay? We really, really need to be not arrogant, but a wee bit bolder in our witness. Just saying. And after reconsidering, good thing they did, after reconsidering, they gave up the matter. And when the king of Judea, that would be Herod, when the king of Judea sent for us and put to us certain questions, we acted in the same manner until he was thoroughly enraged at our replies. This guy's an idiot. He doesn't deserve our respect. But anyway, we left him accordingly without giving any greater heed to him than we do any other common person. I just love these guys. Okay, anyway, really cool part. We're almost done with this because it's not that big, but really cool part. We came to that place then to which we were sent, Bethlehem, and we saw the mother and the child and the star indicating to us the royal babe. We said to the mother, "What is your name, O renowned mother?" She said, "Mary, sirs." Even Mary shows respect. Everybody should show respect. So, "Mary, sirs." And we said to her, "Where are you from?" And she replied, "From the district of the Bethlehemites." And then we said, "Do you have a husband?" Remember, they knew about the virgin birth prophecy, not from Micah, but Page. Okay. She answered, "No, I was only betrothed when a certain Sabbath dawned." Sabbath, that's interesting. "At the rising of the sun, an angel appeared to me, bringing me suddenly the glad tidings of a son. And in trouble I cried out, 'Be it not so, Lord, for I have not a husband.' And he persuaded me to believe and by the will of God, I should have the son. So, I mean, this, it's obvious. There's too many cosmic signs. She can't be lying. This has got to be real. So here's their reaction. We said to her, Mother, mother of all lords of the Persians, has called you blessed. Your glory is great. Now, they're not worshiping Mary, but Mary is to be honored. This is amazing to actually be there. Your glory is great, for you are exalted above all women of renown, for you are shown to be more queenly than all queens. The child was sitting on the ground, being, as she said, in his second year. Interesting. No, so not just born in the manger, in his second year. Having in part the likeness of his mother, she had long hands and a body somewhat delicate. Her hair color was like that of ripe wheat. And she had a round face and had her hair bound up. We brought along with us, now look at this. This is cool. We brought along with us a servant who was a skilled painter. Now, Jews are forbidden to make images, paint pictures, artwork, statues, because it can be connected with idolatry. So in general, at least their tradition is you don't do that. These are not Jews. These are Gentile believers. So if you're going to find the mom and the babe, yeah, let's take a painter with us. Wouldn't that be a great idea? Okay. So we brought along with us a servant who was skillful painter, who painted a portrait of them both, which we brought back with us and placed in our temple. So in that hall of records. I would love to know whatever became of it, and it may have been destroyed, but I would think somebody would have made copies, or, hopefully they're really good artists, and, be really interesting to find out. It is inscribed to Jove the Sun, the mighty God, the King Jesus, the power of Persia, dedicated this. So that's the inscription on the painting, which sounds strange, but I guess it makes better sense in their language. Okay. Each of us taking the child up, each of us in turn, and bearing him in our arms. Wouldn't you love to be able to do that? Pick up the infant Jesus and know who you're holding? Like Simeon, I'm holding the Lord's Messiah in my hands. I'm going to circumcise him in a minute. So that's just got to be amazing. So we, bearing him in our arms, we saluted him and worshiped him, presented him gold, myrrh, and frankincense, addressing him this: We gift you with your own, Jesus, ruler of heaven. In no other way would the things be unordered, in no other way would things unordered be ordered, if not by your hand. In no other way could things heavenly be brought into conjunction with things earthly, if not by your descent. Such service cannot be discharged if only the servant is sent to us, but the master himself is present. Neither can so much be achieved when the king sends only his satraps to war, as when the king himself comes. And let's see here. It became the wisdom of your system, and you should deal in this manner with men, or that you should deal in this manner with them. The child leaped and laughed at our caresses and our words. And when we had bidden the mother farewell, and she had shown us honor, we had testified to her the reverence which became us. We came again to the place at which we lodged. That evening there appeared to us one of a terrible and fearful countenance, saying, Get out quickly, lest you be taken in a snare. And the terror said, Who, O divine leader, or we in terror said, O divine leader, basically, who could plot against us with so heavily unarmed envoy? And he replied, Herod, but get up straightway and depart in safety and in peace. So he warned them not to let Herod know. and don't sit there very long. Now, Herod was with the Russians, with the Romans, so something could have happened, and they were pretty arrogant at the beginning. So get up, get out. So immediately we departed and brought back home this record of what happened to us in Jerusalem and of Christ our Savior, who was made both God and man. To him be the glory and the power unto the ages of ages. And so that's an interesting thing. That's from the church fathers, what the Magi said, and it corresponds beautifully with what happened in Matthew. Anyway, just wanted to share a couple of those things with us because with Christmas, we should always be focusing on the Messiah. He was not born at Christmas, but it's the day we set aside to focus on him, not on presents, not on other things, but focus on the Messiah, on Christ. And I think we need to do that. So we'll go ahead and stop the teaching there.